Are you looking for ways to use your 8x8 pattern paper but don't want a pile of scraps at the end? Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's get making. Today I'm going to use 8x8 paper busting template number 9, which means there are 8 others already available over at JessCrafts.com, and these do make A2 sized cards. So we're going to make 4 A2 sized cards with one piece of 8x8 patterned paper. I have the Graphic 45 collection, the Graphic 45 Grow with Love collection. And it's an 8x8 collection pack. Something that drew me to this particular collection pack is, besides having like really beautiful florals, is there are a lot of papers that I could see cutting apart and turning into embellishments. So particularly this one, you can cut it apart and use all of these little bits as embellishments on your card, or you can just use the other side as a more like a kind of a semi-solid, has like slight pattern to it. Similarly, there is a set that has like all these little seed packets, which is great. Cut it up for embellishments or use the other side. The fact that it's double-sided means that these papers that can be cut up have a sort of dual purpose. And then there are some other papers in the collection that are just your standard double-sided pattern papers. Okay, so for today's card, I'm going to start with the Garden Club pattern paper. On the other side, it has these like lines, and I'm not going to use that at all today. I'm going to treat it like a single-sided paper. I sometimes find these ones with like rows kind of difficult to use, and so sometimes the double-sided, it's easy to get away with just using the other side. But there are other times when you certainly can incorporate them into your card. So I'll cut off that branding strip so we have a true 8x8 pattern paper. And then this template tells us to cut it to 8x4, and then that 8x4 to 4 inches by 4 inches. And so each card is going to use one of these 4x4 squares, and I'm going to show you how I will get the final result for each of these. So you might have noticed that I have wavy lines. It's a little bit unusual. I do cut a lot of like squares and rectangles and that kind of thing. But here we are going to take this and 4x4 and cut it to 2x4. Then that's where we're going to start with our wavy line pattern. So I'm going to take a scissor. You can go in with a die cut instead. Like I have these Lawn Fawn wavy stitched dies, but they're only going to put stitching on one side and not the other. I did see that there is a die out there, I think it's from Pink and Main, that does put the stitching on both sides of a wave. And so if you have something like that, that could be great. But honestly, I'm fine with just freehand using my scissor and cutting a little hill or wave pattern into my paper. You can also trace something, so if you want to like, draw something out and make sure you like it before you go ahead with it, then I would suggest you try that as well, or take a die like this and trace it. If you're like, you have this die, but you would want the stitched on both sides, for instance. So to do that again, second time with this. Now, this pattern paper is not quite directional. Or sorry, it is directional, but it's in a very subtle way. Like I think it's pretty clear in these ones, on this paper, that you want the top to be at the top of those arches. I'm trying to find a second sheet of it for you. But if we look at a chunk of it, like I think that is supposed to be the top of that piece. However, if you turn it upside down, it's not really obvious that it's upside down, but this sketch works best with non-directional pattern paper because when you do layer these up, you are going to be turning them upside down. So I do want to keep that in mind and highlight that for anybody before they start going on this sketch, that they do want to consider a non-directional pattern paper for the sketch. Okay. And then because we're going to be layering the same single-sided paper on top of each other, to create this look, or I guess actually underneath each other like this, if I were to just glue this down as is, it's going to look a little like one solid piece again. And so we want to do something to kind of mix that up. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of ink and ink the top edges of all of my little like hill pieces. And if you don't have a blending brush, you can take any ink pad. I have Distress ink here, but you could absolutely do this with like any colored ink in your collection. Even if you don't have a lot of inks, you could still just do this with black. You can just kind of swipe the edge of your ink pad against the edge of your paper, and that will be enough to add a little bit of definition. As you can see, there's definitely ink there. But because I have the supplies, I like to give it a little bit more of a like softer blend by coming in with a blending brush and tapping some ink on. This is a silicone mat from scrapbook.com that I am working with so that it's a little bit easier to clean. I don't have to worry about staining my work surface. So I'll just come in with a little bit of ink on each one of these, and then we'll be ready to start adhering the first one. Now, you have to be careful about being kind of even-handed like there. I got a little heavy-handed on this one, so if you really want a consistent look, please keep that in mind. Go a little more slowly. I get a little impatient sometimes with ink blending because when I'm trying to build up that like sort of subtle layer of color, it can take a few minutes. Obviously there's some people who really love inking things and do all kinds of fun techniques with that. They ink their die cuts, etc. And it doesn't take too long. It's not a difficult thing to do. Okay, so move that all to the side, which is also nice because then I can keep working here on my desk and go clean that off later, because Distress ink is water reactive. It will always stay easy to clean. And then we can put some adhesive on the back of all of these pieces. I'm going to suggest for now, just put some adhesive along the bottom because I think it will look nice to be able to potentially tuck your embellishment underneath one of these layers. The other reason like the tape can be nice is because it's a little easier to lift up if I do want to tuck a layer later, whereas if I were to put glue underneath this, then trying to lift it up after it's dried, it becomes a lot harder. So now, because there's just a little bit of glue at the bottom, I can tuck each of these layers. These two have kind of a similar hill, so I don't want to put those next to each other. I want to come in with my next layer. And then I'm not pressing anything down too firmly yet, so those hills match. Of course, I should have known that. I just tested them. Okay, these hills are opposite. And then one last one here. And so this is what the sketch gives you. Like this would be done if all you were doing was looking at the sketch here. But I, of course, have always like, this is kind of like your jumping off point. And then after you get this down, then you go ahead and embellish as you see fit. And so because this paper pad had some cut apart embellishments, I'm going to use some of those. I think these are great for cutting apart for embellishments, as well as, oh, this paper's nice. I didn't cut any of these yet. And then I picked one more. I want to show you the one that I use this one. And I think I'm going to do a mix for this. I make 4 cards today, so I think I'm going to use some from here and some from here because the scale is pretty good. This one, these ones here along the side are a little too small. When you are cutting apart something like this to get embellishments from it, you do need to kind of take a moment and think about where could you place an entire cut that won't cut any of the designs in half or like, partially cut them off. So I first cut along here, then here, because then that kind of kept me that whole strip there. Then I cut off the top, down the center, and then I was able to cut those apart. I hope that made some sense, but just gotta like take some time to really kind of think about where you're gonna place those cuts so that you can do one smooth cut on each one. Okay, and then I have some of those embellishments ready to go. This one is quite large, so this one I would probably tuck like on the bottom layer. or you can place it over everything, especially if you use some glue and yours is stuck down now. But I kind of like the idea of tucking it, so that's probably what I would do to finish this card. But then say this one, this embellishment here, if I place it all the way at the bottom, I still am left with a lot of white space on my card, and it also kind of awkwardly covers this, or my background paper. Like there's just a little bit peeking out at the top. So instead, I would probably move it up a layer or two, or I'd place it on top here in this corner. You could also mat your embellishments as an alternative, but I just kind of want to talk about this as a choice in terms of how I would go about embellishing with different size embellishments and this sketch. So again here, if I were to place this down, that to me leaves a lot of white space, and I do have suggestions for what to do with white space, but I'll probably bump it up or place it on top so that there's a little bit less white space. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight really quickly is that this strip along the bottom that I cut off, it has the phrases, life begins in a garden, springtime, and the garden is my happy place. None of these strike me as a particularly like a card sentiment. You could certainly use springtime and do a happy spring type card. Or if you have someone who really loves to garden, just sort of an everyday card, you go ahead and, you know, put those on there. But what I would also consider is the back side of this is kind of a semi-solid, like we mentioned before. So I think I could stamp some sentiments on here and use that to also help balance out any of my embellishments. So if this one's going to have to go here in the top right, then here in the bottom left, I could come in with an embellishment. And I'm going to be bold to just decide that I'm going to cut that size. I'd be able to glue it there and add some kind of sentiment to complete this card. I'll keep adding embellishments until I have 4 cards made with this one sheet of 8x8 pattern paper without making any scraps. Now, of course, I did pull in some embellishments from another piece of pattern paper, and so that one may have scraps and things for me to use in the future, but you could easily pull embellishments that didn't have to be cut from pattern paper and did not create scraps or anything to deal with in the future. But I do, for me, I'm like, I look at these and instead of thinking, oh, now I have scraps to deal with, I'm like, now I have embellishments to use. If you found this video helpful, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with your share to your crafty community. Subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.